Hey guys! Tonight we brush off the steam of a Finnish sauna and step onto the icy wooden planks of a crowded harbor in 1920s Helsinki. The wind stings your face, your scarf is half frozen, and somewhere behind you your mother's voice is already fading in the snow. You're not sure if she's crying or praying, probably both. In your coat pocket, a folded piece of paper with an address in New York, a handful of coins, and your cousin's photo that you keep pretending not to look at. You're one of nearly 400,000 Finns to attempt this, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this boat ride without vomiting. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious who's lying in the dark with us. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drag your suitcase through the slush and slanted rain of Helsinki. The Sirtala Hotelli is crowded. Nearly 200 fellow immigrants wait with you, fidgeting, pacing, mumbling nonsense to pass the time. Some are trying to joke, others are silently haunted. You spot a girl no older than 19, pale as linen, staring through a window as though she's already lost something. There are stories behind every face. One man left because of love. He says his girl gave him the rukaset, the boot. Another fled a tangled inheritance dispute. One is on his 5th journey across the Atlantic simply because he's addicted to leaving. And one woman, dressed neatly but trembling, carries shame heavier than her luggage. On the morning of December 12th, the ship finally arrives. The docks smell like salt and rusted iron. The planks groan as you board. The sky weeps a gray drizzle. A few people cross themselves. Others simply grip the railing and stare back at the receding silhouette of Finland's coast. Forests, chimneys, church spires, all slipping into fog. It feels like betrayal and salvation, both in one breath. You try not to look back because you know, deep in your gut, like so many others, that you might never see that coastline again. The first day on the ship feels almost tolerable. You claim a bunk, lower row, near the hallway, between a family with 4 children and a man who coughs like he's hiding gravel in his lungs. You feel your stomach turn at every pitch and roll of the vessel, but you hold it in, mostly. You notice how quickly people become silent. The chatter dies by the hour. Then come the moans. The sickness is universal. The Atlantic shows no mercy. Harma Mary, the gray sea becomes your world. You don't even bother to keep track of the days anymore. Some men grow so pale they look carved from ice. The women stay under blankets whimpering. A few children begin to cry and don't stop for 2 days. At one point, you stagger out toward the deck for air, gripping the rail. It's December, and the wind slices into your bones like razors. But you need the cold to stay awake, to remind yourself you're still alive. Inside, the atmosphere is humid and sour with vomit, boiled potatoes, and the metallic tang of fear. One girl sings old hymns under her breath. A man prays in Swedish. You lie back on your bunk and dream of dry ground and your father's axe splitting frozen wood. On the 4th night, the ship hits open sea with full force. Waves rise like mountains. The boat doesn't rock, it climbs and drops, each motion like falling down a well. At one point, your bunkmate grabs your sleeve and whispers, "This is the kind of weather that sends men straight to the bottom." You want to laugh, but your stomach lurches. You crawl to the edge of your bed and gag into a bucket. Historians still argue whether these steerage-class Atlantic crossings were truly inhumane or simply a grim necessity. All you know is that nothing in your village prepared you for this. And yet, you survive. Not everyone does. During the storm, 3 women die. They say it was the shock, the heart giving out. Their bodies are sewn into canvas and weighted. One brief prayer is mumbled, then they're tipped into the Black Sea like unwanted cargo. By Christmas Eve, the water's calm. The sea sparkles in the moonlight. They're singing again. An American professor gives a bizarre speech about a world republic under one rainbow flag. You don't understand half of it, but his eyes burn with conviction. He's made this crossing 5 times. You wonder if he'll ever stop. There's a dance on board, too. The Spaniards light up the floor with their wild steps. Even the Russians try to keep up, tripping over themselves in wool trousers too stiff for rhythm. You watch from the side, dizzy and dazed, still weak from the storm. Someone hands you a sugar biscuit. You eat it like it's holy bread. On the 10th night, you finally see it. Lights on the horizon, New York. You don't shout, you don't clap. You just squint through the railings. You half expected to see golden streets and singing angels. Instead, you see smoke, chimneys, ships larger than you've ever imagined, buildings that scrape the sky. It's not a dream. It's something harder, louder, realer. When the ship pulls into harbor, the officer announces that third-class passengers must report to Ellis Island for inspection. You already knew this. You clutch your documents. They're damp and smudged, but legible. A man behind you asks if he should lie about his age. A woman in front hides a child under her coat. You wait your turn. The line snakes for hours. There are men in uniforms shouting in English, French, and badly broken Finnish. The walls are lined with charts and lamps that buzz. You watch as people are questioned, prodded, judged. One man's papers are taken. He vanishes through a door and doesn't return. You make it through. Somehow. A few words in halting English, a glance from the inspector, a nod, and a stamp. You step outside. The air smells like coal and old bread. You are no longer a passenger. You are an immigrant. And no one claps.
You don't remember your first breath in New York. What you remember is the noise. The clang of steel wheels, the hiss of steam, the curses flying in 10 languages. You blink at the sky, which seems impossibly tall, as if someone took the lid off the world. Ellis Island fades behind you, but the anxiety doesn't. You're told a man will be waiting for you, someone from the Finnish community who helps newcomers, but no one is there. You stand still while the crowd flows around you like water past a stone. A police officer waves you forward. You mumble, "Suomi," and he just shrugs. You hold up the paper with your cousin's name and address, written in neat, hopeful ink. The officer squints, points to a carriage, and mutters something that sounds vaguely like Brooklyn. You follow the gesture and climb into a rickety vehicle pulled by a tired horse. The driver says nothing. You stare out at the buildings. They don't end. They don't breathe. They just rise and smother the sky. Historians still debate whether Ellis Island offered a gateway or a gauntlet. For you, it feels like both. The tenement building smells like cabbage, pipe smoke, and rain-soaked wool. You knock 3 times as instructed. A woman with gray hair, round glasses, and arms like a blacksmith answers the door. She stares at you a full 5 seconds before barking something in Sabo dialect. You answer in your soft Finnish Southern, and she sighs. "Another one," she mutters, and pulls you inside. This is the boarding house. Not your cousin's home. He's in Chicago now, apparently, but a stopgap. You were given a cot in the corner of a room with 6 other men. There are no windows. You try not to breathe too deeply. One man talks in his sleep. Another weeps quietly into a coat every night. The oldest among them stares at the ceiling as if waiting for something. Death, maybe, or breakfast. Meals are communal. Thick black coffee, potatoes fried in lard, and bread so dense you could tile a roof with it. You eat in silence. Speak only when spoken to. The house mother, that muscular old woman, watches everyone like a hawk. Her name is Maya, but everyone calls her the General. She runs this house like a war camp, and if you leave crumbs on the table, you will regret it. At night, the city howls. Carriages shouting, the distant clanging of factories. You lie awake under a thin blanket, trying to remember the quiet of Finnish snow. It's gone. Here, even silence is loud. You get your first job 2 days later. A friend of a friend knows a man who knows a mill that always needs hands. The foreman doesn't care if you speak English. He cares if you can lift things. You nod. Yes, you can lift. And so you are inducted into the kingdom of noise. The textile mill is an angry beast. Machines roar, belts snap, steam hisses. You can't hear your own thoughts. You just move, carry bolts of cloth, feed thread, dodge cogs. The floor is slick with oil. The windows are smeared with grime. You don't even know what time it is because the sun is a rumor. 12 hours pass like molasses. You eat in the back alley, sitting on crates with hands that tremble from vibration. Someone shares a boiled egg. You trade a piece of rye bread. Then it's back in. Back into the beast. There are other Finns here. 4, maybe 5. You recognize them not by language, but by the way they flinch when someone yells. You exchange nods. No names, just nods. A kind of sad solidarity. One man jokes that if the machines don't kill you, the coffee will. No one laughs. The coffee is indeed terrifying, black, bitter, and somehow gritty. You drink it anyway. At home, Maya assigns you chores. Sweep the stairs, empty the water bucket. Don't forget to boil it first. She catches you once trying to skip a step and hits you lightly with a spoon. We may be poor, she growls, but we are not animals. You don't argue. You write a letter home. This one is shorter. You say the city is busy, that you found work, and that everyone is kind. You don't mention the man who collapsed next to a loom or the boy who lost 3 fingers on his first day. You don't talk about the smell or the cold that seems to find you even indoors. Instead, you tell your mother the truth that isn't quite the truth. You are surviving. There's a small Finnish bookstore a few blocks away. You go once on your day off. The shelves are dusty, the clerk ancient, but the words are familiar. You pick up a collection of Eno Leino's poems and hold it like it might dissolve. It smells like Finland. Ink, hope, and regret. Later that week, a girl arrives at the boarding house. She's traveling alone with a small trunk and a steel gaze. Maya puts her in the women's dorm upstairs. At dinner, she introduces herself. Her voice is soft. Her accent is Western. You nod. She nods. That's it. Still, you think about her later. As the machines rattle your bones and the darkness hums with ambition. One evening, there's a commotion outside. A crowd gathers on the corner, shouting, laughter, someone playing a fiddle. You step outside and see a group of Swedes dancing in the street. They've had too much to drink. One of them throws a bottle. It shatters. A police officer appears. The Swedes vanish. You stay rooted to the spot, the night air cold in your lungs. For a moment, you imagine dancing, too. Just for a second. before the general calls you back in. Inside, the hallway creaks. The general snuffs the lanterns. You return to your cot. The city continues, indifferent. You've been here 6 days. You close your eyes, not knowing if you're still leaving Finland or already arriving in America.
The morning starts with shouting. 2 men arguing in Finnish just outside the boarding house kitchen, their voices bouncing off the brick walls like hammers. One wants to leave for Ohio, says there's mining work and decent wages. The other thinks he's a fool. The further west you go, he hisses, the more likely you are to die under a pile of rocks. You eat your breakfast, lukewarm potatoes and dense rye, without a word. Across from you sits a man who worked in a paper mill back in Jyväskylä. He hasn't said anything in 2 days, not since his cousin was detained at Ellis Island. They say the cousin coughed during inspection. That's all it took. You leave for work early, boots clicking against the wet cobblestones. The streetcar rattles past, spitting sparks. You can't afford it. You walk. By now, the textile mill smells like home. Oil, heat, metal, and sweat. You've developed calluses in all the right places. Your back doesn't even scream anymore. It just murmurs its discontent. The foreman nods when you arrive, grunts when you leave, and never says your name right. Still, this is stability, of a kind. Your first real lesson in American life comes not from the machines, but from the silence between them. During lunch, one of the Irish workers, a wiry man with sharp elbows and missing teeth, tells a joke. You don't get it, but you laugh anyway. He pats your back so hard you nearly choke. You Finns are all right, he says. You smile. It's the first time someone here has looked at you like a person, not just another pair of hands. Historians still argue whether early immigrant labor was exploitative or simply part of the industrial growing pains. Either way, you're the growing pain, you know that much. It's around this time you start hearing about Ellis Island's darker side. Not just inspections, but detentions, quarantines, deportations. A Swedish boy who accidentally mentioned his socialist uncle. A Russian woman suspected of moral degeneracy because she was unmarried and wore lipstick. You start keeping your head lower. You hear from a neighbor that your name was misrecorded, that the immigration officer, too impatient to ask again, shortened it. Where once it had the rolling weight of your grandfather's line, now it's a clipped echo. You were no longer what you were, just a simpler version of yourself. Fewer syllables, easier to file. Still, you're lucky. Others didn't make it through. One of the new boarders is a man in his 50s, eyes rimmed red, hands trembling. His wife and 2 daughters were turned away. He doesn't say much, just stares at the wall. Sometimes you hear him whispering names in the dark. Maya tries to keep morale high. She makes pula once a week, the scent of cardamom flooding the narrow halls like a hymn. It doesn't fix everything, but for one sweet hour, you're back in your mother's kitchen, watching dough rise near the stove. You try not to cry. On Sundays, you walk, up past the docks where the wind tastes like salt and rust, past the Polish church with its painted saints, past a line of barber shops and tailors, each with signs and languages you don't recognize. You find a quiet bench and just sit. You don't need silence. You need stillness. A young man sits beside you one day. He's Finnish too, from Tampere. Worked in a shoe factory before he left. He tells you about a job opportunity in Pennsylvania, mining. Dirty work, but it pays. You nod, file it away. Later, back at the house, you mention it to Maya. She frowns. They say that, but they come back coughing blood, if they come back at all. Still, the idea lingers. One night, you overhear an argument in the women's dorm. The new girl, Ilmi, you learned her name, refuses to marry a man twice her age. says she didn't cross the Atlantic to become a housemaid with extra steps. Maya calls her ungrateful. Ilmi slams the door. The next morning, she's gone. You wonder where she went, whether she found something better or just something different. There's a man in the neighborhood who sells newspapers from a cart. He's missing one arm and always greets you in a mix of English and who knows what. He calls you Johnny Finn no matter how many times you tell him your name. He smells like licorice and dust. Sometimes he gives you yesterday's paper for free. You can't read it all yet, but you try. The headlines are always loud. War, strike, fire, death. You turn the page and look for the comics. One morning, the general announces that the basement flooded. You and 3 others are conscripted to fix it. Water up to your ankles, buckets in hand, backs bent like horses. When it's done, she hands each of you a hard candy and says, "We survive because we do, not because it's fair." You never forget that line. That evening, a letter arrives from home. Your mother's handwriting is careful, ornate, as if each letter is a prayer. She writes about the neighbor's new cow, about your brother's trouble in school, about how the church roof finally collapsed. She asks if you are eating well, if you have shoes, if America is everything they said. You read it 3 times before bed. You don't write back right away. What would you say? That the work is hard? That the city is colder than snow? That you sometimes forget what silence sounds like? Instead, you lie in your cot, listening to the creak of floorboards, the distant clang of a trolley, and someone humming a lullaby in the kitchen. It is not home, but it is something.
The kitchen always smells like burnt coffee. Not the bitter roasted scent you grew up with, but something sharper, acrid, impatient. Every morning, Maija boils the same dented pot on the same iron stove, and every morning someone complains. "Tastes like shoe leather," mutters a man from Kuusamo. "Wouldn't give it to a dog," adds another, dunking stale bread into the black sludge anyway. You drink it without a word, because at this hour, anything warm is sacred. Outside, the streets hum. The buildings across from the tenement lean over you like judgmental old relatives. Smoke rises from every crack in the city. The air is thick with soot and fish, horse sweat and ash. And behind it all, the endless rhythm of machinery, the heartbeat of your new world. Today is your first day off in 3 weeks. You have no plans. That's the problem. You walk. Not far, just enough to breathe air that doesn't belong to the factory. Enough to remind yourself the city is more than brick and smoke. Down one alley, you hear a harmonica. On another, a woman hangs laundry above a bakery window. It flaps like surrender flags. You find a bench near the market square and sit. You count pigeons. You watch children chase each other between barrels. Then, a shadow passes. She sits next to you. Ilmi. She's wearing a blue coat now, slightly torn at the cuff. Her face looks tired but lit from within, like she's discovered something you haven't. She nods. You nod. Silence fills the space between you like warm broth. "You look alive," she says in Finnish. "So do you," you reply. Turns out she's living in a small apartment above a laundry, working 6 days a week pressing shirts from men who don't know her name. The landlady takes half her wages in rent and the other half in attitude, but she has a key to her own door, and that, she says, is worth more than gold. Historians still debate how Finnish women navigated the constraints of immigration and labor. Some say they found more freedom. Others insist it was just oppression with a new coat of paint. Ilmi doesn't seem to care. She lights a cigarette and shrugs. "You stay in long?" she asks. "Until I can't," you answer. She laughs, flicks ash into the wind. and leaves without saying goodbye. Back at the boarding house, things are tense. A man lost his job at the docks and took it out on the wall, literally. There's a hole now, and Maya is fuming. She gathers everyone into the kitchen that evening, hands on hips, apron dusted in flour, and delivers a sermon worthy of a bishop. You think this country owes you something? It doesn't even know your name. We survive because we stand together. We eat together. We clean together. And if one of you breaks another wall, I'll send you through it head first. Silence. Then someone clears their throat. I think the coffee's ready, they say. Laughter bubbles up, brief, sharp, real. Even Maija cracks a smile, a small one, the kind you earn. Later that night, you help patch the hole, with old boards, glue, and a stubbornness that feels very Finnish. The man who punched it doesn't say much, just hands you a nail when needed. That's apology enough. A few days pass. Routine returns, the mill, the stink of grease, the evening meals, but something in you has shifted. You begin to learn names, not just of people, but of places. You learn how to ask for directions in English. You learn that, excuse me, softens almost any encounter. You start to recognize the trolley driver. He nods now when he sees you, maybe even smiles. You also learn who not to trust. The foreman's nephew, for instance, who offers special deals on boots that fall apart in the rain, or the landlord who promises repairs tomorrow that never come, or the Irish gang that patrols certain streets looking for easy targets with accents. One night, Maya calls you to the parlor. A man has arrived, middle-aged, with a limp and thick spectacles. He says he's from Ironwood, Michigan, a mining town. Says they need workers, good pay, plenty of Finns, fresh air. You look at him and think, maybe. But Maija steps between you. He's not here for you, she says sharply. Later, she sits beside you in the kitchen. The stove clicks and sighs. She offers you half a boiled potato and a story. I came here 20 years ago, had a husband, 3 boys, all gone now. Work, sickness, war, doesn't matter. What matters is what you build while you can. Don't let this place swallow you. Make it listen. You nod. You don't know what else to do. The next morning, you find a note by your cot, written in cramped, tidy Finnish, from the man who punched the wall. It reads, "Sorry about the hammer. Thanks for the boards. If you ever want to try your luck up north, come find me in Duluth." You fold the note carefully, place it in your coat. A week later, Ilmi appears at the door. Her eyes are bright. "Come with me," she says. "There's a meeting." You follow her across town to a basement filled with chairs, steam, and the smell of ink and tobacco. A Finnish mutual aid society. Co-op posters on the wall. A woman at the front reads from a pamphlet. Workers' rights, wages, education, solidarity. You don't understand all the words, but the feeling is unmistakable. Hope. You take a seat. Ilmi smiles. For the first time since the ship, you feel like you're no longer sinking.
The job comes from a man with a crooked tie and a voice like crushed gravel. He stands outside the co-op meeting, smoking a cigar stub and squinting at everyone like they owe him something. "You speak English?" he asks. You nod, cautiously. "Good enough," he grunts, and hands you a slip of paper with an address in New Jersey. "Factory, leatherwork, pays better than rags." And just like that, you leave the textile mill behind. The factory is older, darker, and far louder than you imagined. Inside it smells like scorched hide and ammonia. The air stings your eyes. The machines here aren't humming, they're snarling. Massive drums spin animal hides into strips. Men with stained aprons carry tubs of chemicals with warning signs you can't read. There's no training, just a gesture toward a bucket and the barked word, scrape. You learn fast, because if you don't, the acid will learn your skin faster. You're not alone here. There's a small tribe of Finns clustered near the back. Men from Vasa, Tampere, and Savonlinna. They speak in hushed tones, stick together during breaks, and eat from the same tin boxes. You're welcomed with a nod and half a hard-boiled egg. That's plenty. There's an unspoken rule. If you value your hands, don't ask too many questions. The machines take fingers the way fire takes paper. One blink too slow, one sleeve too loose, and you'll go home lighter than you came. Historians still argue whether immigrant workers understood the full danger of these jobs, or if desperation simply outran caution. The answer for you is both. Every dollar matters more than every blister. At night, you return to Brooklyn, your coat soaked with the reek of tannins and wet leather. Maja wrinkles her nose. "I like the oil smell better," she says, handing you a bar of harsh soap. You scrub your hands until your knuckles bleed. The smell lingers anyway. Ilmi doesn't mind. She invites you to a reading group run by a Finnish-American teacher named Elgis. He's thin, balding, with eyes that burn like matches. He reads from Walt Whitman, translates as he goes. "I contain multitudes," he recites. You're not sure what that means, but it feels like a truth too big to say out loud. One woman in the group reads a poem she wrote. It's about coal dust and cardamom, about missing home and making bread with borrowed yeast. She cries while reading. No one interrupts. When she finishes, the room is silent except for the clicking of a nearby radiator. You return every week. The factory pays a few cents more per day than the mill. Still not enough. You take on extra hours, skip Sundays, eat less. Some nights you dream of your father's fields, wide, green, and breathing. You wake to a ceiling cracked like old parchment and the shrill shriek of trolleys below. One morning, your foreman pulls you aside. "You, name." You answer. He waves his hand. "Too long. You're Johnny now." And just like that, your identity is negotiated down to 2 syllables. You try to fight it once, correcting him politely. He laughs. "Johnny it is." The other men follow suit. You sign your payslip with your new name, hand shaking. It feels like a theft you agreed to. Still, you endure, because the other option is hunger. Lunches become sacred, not because of the food, mostly old bread, cabbage stew, or fish so salted it crackles in your teeth, but because of the people. The Finns share stories from home. One man swears he saw a bear dance for vodka in Lapland. Another claims his grandfather built a house with no nails, only wooden pegs and pride. You share too. About your village, the river in summer, the way birch trees whisper when the wind is right. No one says it aloud, but every story is a lifeline, a thread tied to a country slowly fading from view. The boarding house grows tighter. A new wave of arrivals means more beds, less space, and the permanent scent of boiled turnips. Maja tries to maintain order, but even she can't stop the tension from rising. One night, 2 men argue over soap. The next, someone breaks a window. You help repair it with the spare board and leftover newspaper. That board has a cartoon on it, something about the president. You leave it facing inward. It makes people smile. Ilmi starts volunteering at the local Finnish church. Not for religion. God can wait. she says, but for the food pantry. Every Thursday she hands out bread, lard, beans, and sometimes, when miracles align, jam. You help when you can. The pastor is kind. He speaks slowly, with gestures. You understand more every week. One evening, after cleanup, Ilmi walks you home. The city feels softer under the gas lamps. "Do you miss it?" she asks. "Finland?" She nods. "Yes," you say. "Every day." She stops walking. "I don't," she says. You blink. "I miss who I was, but not what I had." You think about that long after she turns the corner. There's a letter from home waiting on your bed. Your mother's handwriting again. This one is shorter, more tired. She says your brother wants to join you. She asks if there is room. You fold the letter gently, place it next to the others in your trunk. That night, Maja burns the coffee again. Someone complains, but this time another boarder defends her. "She's been boiling that pot since 1903. It's part of the flavor now." They laugh. It's the first time laughter fills the room without hesitation. You sit by the stove, hands curled around your tin mug, and listen to the creak of chairs, the rhythm of a familiar language, the soft rumble of stories shared between sips. You don't know what tomorrow will bring, but for tonight, the coffee is warm, and you are not alone.
The letter home takes 2 hours to write. You stare at the blank paper for nearly half of that, pen hovering, mind spinning. What can you say that doesn't crush her? How do you write about sore hands and the acidic stink of the tannery without making your mother weep beside the stove? So you lie. You write that work is steady, that the city is noisy but full of opportunity, that you've met kind people, Maya and Ilmi by name, though you soften the truth about both, that there's a church nearby, and even a small library with Finnish newspapers. You say you've adjusted well, that you're eating plenty, that your boots are holding up fine. And then, at the bottom, you add a sentence you don't believe. "I am doing just fine, and America is good to me." You seal the envelope carefully. The truth would cost too much in worry. So you send her a fable instead, one where her son is not bent over chemicals, not losing sleep to sirens, not flinching at factory whistles. She'll read it aloud, maybe, to the neighbors. They'll nod, satisfied. Your sacrifice is the myth they want to hear. Historians still argue whether immigrant letters home were a form of emotional survival or subtle propaganda. Maybe both, maybe neither. But in every letter, there's a hidden ledger, what you endure and what you protect your family from knowing. At the factory, someone loses a hand. He was new, Polish, maybe 20 years old. His name sounded like sugar dropped into water, quick to vanish. It happened before lunch, a moment's distraction, a scream that made the machines pause for the first time in months. The foreman barked orders. The blood was washed away before the sirens even faded. Later, someone found his glove in the drain, folded like it still held fingers. No one talks about it, but the silence thickens. That same day, Ilmi stops by the boarding house. She brings half a loaf of fresh rye and a tiny tin of jam. From Maja, she says, though Maja pretends not to care. Still, the jam disappears by morning. You and Ilmi walk down by the Hudson. The river churns like it's trying to remember the sea. Barges groan under cargo. You see a man sleeping under newspapers, a child selling pencils, a preacher yelling about sin on a soapbox. Ilmi points to a ferry churning upriver. Ever think of just getting on one and going? You say, all the time. Where? You shrug. Someplace with silence. She smiles. There's no such place anymore. At the tannery, the air feels thicker. The safety inspector is coming. You've heard of him, a man with a mustache and a clipboard who speaks in clipped English and pretends not to see.
The foreman yells for cleaner aprons, straighter piles. He passes out new gloves that look barely used. The inspector arrives, scribbles, nods, and leaves. That afternoon, someone finds a dead rat in a vat. They fish it out with a stick and keep working. You develop a cough. Not a cold, not flu, just a persistent rasp that won't leave. You chew licorice root. Ilmi gives you some tar syrup from the co-op. Maija insists on hot water and silence. At night, you dream of snow, of the stillness of pine trees, of the sound boots make on fresh powder. You wake up coughing, your blanket damp with sweat. One evening, while scrubbing your hands in the yard, a boy approaches. He can't be more than 12. Freckles, patched clothes, the wild look of someone used to hearing no. He doesn't speak, just holds out a flyer. You take it. Finnish theater night, it says in ornate cursive. One night only. Songs, stories, and scenes from the homeland. You don't even hesitate. The next night, you sit on a wooden chair in a drafty hall with 50 other Finns. The air smells of beeswax and damp wool. On stage, a woman in a shawl recites a monologue from Alexis Kivi. A man sings a hymn you haven't heard since your grandmother's funeral. Then a child recites a poem about a lark over Karelia. People weep. Silently. Proudly. You weep too. It's the first time you felt entirely human in months. Ilmi is there, sitting 2 rows ahead. She doesn't look back, but you know she knows. On the way home, you pass 2 Americans speaking loudly outside a bar. One of them calls you Russian. You don't correct him. What would be the point? Later, you practice your English in front of the mirror. I am from Finland, you say, again, again. You try to make it sound proud. Maija watches you, arms crossed. She says, practice all you want. They'll still call you whatever suits them. You don't answer, but inside, something hardens. The next Sunday, the boarding house gathers for dinner. Maija has somehow secured a chicken. It's dry and small, but no one cares. Ilmi brings potatoes. The man from Duluth, who still hasn't left, makes a strange onion gravy. You eat until your stomach aches. Afterwards, people sing. You forget the words halfway through, but you hum anyway. The melody knows its way home. When the meal ends, Maija pours what's left of the coffee into mismatched cups. It still tastes like despair, but this time it's warm despair shared in laughter. That night, you finally write a second letter. You tell your mother about the Finnish theater, about Maija's fierce kindness, about how you work hard and dream harder. You don't mention the cough, or the rat, or the boy with no hand. You write a line that makes your hand tremble. I think I'm becoming American. And then you cross it out. Instead, you write, I am still me.
It all begins with the coffee pot. A new boarder, Paavo from Rovaniemi, brings with him a strange contraption, an enamel kettle with a delicate spout and a handle like a question mark. He claims it brews better coffee. Soft water, smooth boiled, gentle grounds, he says with the confidence of a prophet. Maya's unimpressed. My pot has boiled more beans than he has brain cells, she growls. But people are curious. On Sunday morning, the kitchen fills earlier than usual. Paavo works his kettle like an alchemist, measuring and pouring with care. The aroma is different, less bitter, more rounded, almost sweet. The first sip stuns the room into reverence. And that's when the trouble starts. By the next Sunday, 2 more boarders are attempting their own brews. One uses a sock, another swears by eggshells. The stove becomes a battlefield. Maya, insulted by the rebellion, doubles down with her traditional brew, black as coal and twice as vengeful. No one says it, but fewer people refill their cups. The boarding house is at war. Historians might not record the Great Finnish Coffee Revolt of 1922, but for you, it marks a turning point. Until now, Maya had ruled the household like a benevolent czar. Now her throne is under siege, one filter at a time. The conflict escalates. Someone hides her old kettle. A replacement arrives, enamel chipped and smiling. Maya retaliates by banning all non-house issued brews. A note appears on the wall in shaky handwriting. Only one pot, one people, one roast. Paavo holds secret tastings in the laundry room. But it's more than coffee. Beneath the surface, there's a new energy. The boarders are starting to speak up, not just about beverages, but about wages, hours, air quality in the tannery, how their names are shortened or twisted by bosses too lazy to care. One evening in a smoky corner of the co-op meeting hall, someone says, "What if we form our own union?" Ilmi nods slowly. What if we already have? She's been organizing quietly, meetings, flyers, whispered alliances between laundresses and janitors, tailors and sawyers. She's relentless, but never loud. Her strength lies in silence that hums like a saw blade. You begin helping her, translating pamphlets, setting up chairs, passing messages through the grapevine of the Finnish community. Then one night, a storm breaks. Maya, in a rare show of rage, throws Paavo's kettle into the courtyard. It clatters across the cobblestones like a falling crown. Everyone hears it. The next morning, Paavo is gone. His bed stripped, his trunk empty. But the coffee debate doesn't end. It transforms. Now each breakfast is an uneasy truce. Some drink Maya's brew, others sneak their own. No one speaks of the kettle, but it hangs over the room like smoke. One afternoon at the tannery, the foreman screams. Not unusual, but this time it's at you. You missed a batch. You didn't. You know you didn't. But he needs someone to blame, and your name is the easiest to shout. You open your mouth to defend yourself, to push back, but the words die in your throat. English fails you, not in meaning, but in volume. You can feel Ilmi's words behind your ribs. Make it listen. But the machines are too loud. You work double shift to make up for the mistake. Your fingers blister again. You stop by the co-op that night, slumped and silent. Ilmi hands you a cup of tea. No one gets a voice for free. You have to build it. You drink the tea. It tastes like ash and lemon. A week later, you and Ilmi host a kitchen meeting in the boarding house. Maya allows it, reluctantly, as long as it doesn't turn into another coffee fight. You laugh. She doesn't. 15 people cram into the narrow room. They sit on crates, upturned pails, whatever they can find. The discussion starts slow. Wages, rent, dangerous machines. Then someone mentions Paavo. Then someone else brings up a girl who slipped on a wet factory floor and was docked pay for missing work. It becomes clear the anger runs deeper than burnt coffee. That night you lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the murmur of the city outside. Trolleys, dogs, a couple arguing in Yiddish. Then softly, the creak of someone walking past your door. You rise. In the courtyard, under a flickering lamp, you find Maya. She's holding her old kettle. "I found it behind the woodpile," she mutters. "Still works." She looks at you like someone offering a truce. You nod. The next morning, the coffee tastes like old times, but now there's a second pot next to it, Ilmi's, labeled clearly, community blend. No one complains. The revolution has learned diplomacy. At work, changes come slowly. A complaint filed here, a shift adjusted there. You notice new gloves appear, coarser, but thicker. The foreman shouts less, he watches more. I suspect he's heard whispers. Ilmi keeps organizing. She wears her coat like armor. I help print a leaflet. Fair pay for clean hands. The ink stains my thumbs for days. And always in the background, the coffee brews. One day I see something strange. 2 factory bosses drinking from tin mugs. I swear it's Maya's blend. I almost laugh. I don't know if this is what victory looks like. It's small, quiet, bittersweet, but it's yours. And for now, that's enough.
Winter doesn't arrive like a guest. It kicks the door down. You wake one morning, and the world outside your window is turned white, the rooftops smothered in snow, the sky smeared gray like old dishwater. The air bites. Your breath curls in the room, visible as if even the warmth inside has given up trying. You pile on 2 pairs of socks, a scarf, and Maya's gift, a knitted cap with a crooked stitch near the brim. She said it was nothing. You said thank you like it was gold. The boarding house transforms. Everything takes longer. The hallways fill with the squeak of wet boots, the smell of drying wool, and that low Finnish hum, half lullaby, half complaint, that everyone makes while bracing for the cold. Maya puts a towel at the bottom of every door to keep drafts out. The stove stays lit all day, even when fuel is short. No one mentions it aloud, but everyone's sleeping closer to the radiators now. You walk to work with your head down, wind clawing at your face, the city suddenly full of slippery staircases and men swearing at frozen horse carts. The factory doesn't change much. Inside, it's the same unbearable heat, the same acrid stench. But stepping out of a boiling tannery into snow-covered streets feels like time travel in reverse. Your sweat freezes into crusty ice patches before you reach the first corner. At night, you huddle under as many blankets as you can find. Some belong to the boarding house. Others were passed to you by silent, shivering men who understand what it means to give without words. You wrap yourself like a mummy and still wake up cold. You dream of saunas, of birch leaves, of your mother's warm kitchen and the scent of cardamom. And you are not alone. Everyone in the house begins to lean in a little more, toward warmth, toward each other. A man who barely spoke before now plays accordion in the evenings. Maya softens her rules, just slightly. More bread at dinner, longer baths for the older tenants, a shrug instead of a scolding when someone leaves snow puddles in the hallway. And then something strange starts happening. They begin to sing. Not in concerts, not on stage, just softly, in corners, while kneading dough or mending socks. Ilmi hums a tune you faintly remember from childhood. The Duluth man tries to harmonize, poorly, but everyone smiles. Even Maya mutters the words to an old hymn one morning while stirring her infamous porridge. You don't talk about it. You don't have to. The melodies are threads of memory, tying you to a Finland that's far too far, and to a self you're scared of forgetting. Historians still argue whether folk music was a form of passive resistance or simply comfort food for the soul. But you understand now, it's both. It's a rebellion against silence and a bandage against loneliness. On Sundays, when the factory gives its grudging rest, you and Elmi begin attending Finnish church services. Not because you're devout, but because it's the only place in the city where the language fills an entire room without apology. The pews creak, the hymns drag, the sermons drone. But when the congregation sings together, the sound wraps around your bones. One Sunday, Pastor Yuka passes you a pamphlet after the service. Finnish English Language Circle, Thursdays, 7 p.m. You raise an eyebrow. He smiles, like someone offering fire in an ice storm. You go. It's in a cold classroom in the back of a community center, the walls lined with yellowing maps and posters for harvest festivals long past. The room smells like chalk and hope. A handful of immigrants gather, most of them younger, a few with children curled up in their laps. You learn how to say laundry, gas heater, and strike. You teach them hiliaisus, which the English language doesn't quite deserve, silence, but full of depth and peace. You stumble over squirrel. Everyone laughs, even you. Lydia is there. She knits during the lessons, never looking down. She's 28, but speaks English like a school teacher. She arrived at 16 and never left the city. Still doesn't feel like mine, she tells you, but I can order a sandwich without fear. That's a start. Ilmi joins the class too, eventually. Not because she needs to, but because she wants to make sure you don't skip. She corrects your pronunciation with too much satisfaction. On your walk home from one meeting, she says, "I want out." You stop. Out of what? This tight life. I want a place where I don't have to explain everything. where I can rest without feeling like I'm falling behind. You don't have an answer, but her words stay with you. The tannery announces a slowdown. They call it winter cuts. Your hours are slashed. So is your pay. No warning, no appeal, just a posted notice and a line of angry workers shuffling back to homes that suddenly feel too empty. Maya cuts portions in the kitchen. She doesn't explain, but you see it. More cabbage, less meat, more crust, less filling. She begins knitting gloves to sell. Even the youngest in the house, barely 12, starts delivering newspapers. And still, no one leaves. One night, you host a makeshift gathering in the common room. No occasion, just candles, some leftover rye bread, a borrowed fiddle. You take turns telling stories. Most of them half lies, all of them warm. One man talks about a bear he outran in Lapland. Another describes the boat that nearly sank on his journey across the Atlantic. Ilmi makes up a story about a moose that snuck into a dance hall. It's ridiculous. Everyone laughs. You laugh. For the first time in weeks, you forget the cold. Then, suddenly, as these things often happen, death knocks again. Mr. Rajo, the quietest man in the house, who had been coughing since October, passes into sleep. Maya finds him early, still holding the blanket under his chin like a child. She doesn't cry. No one does. Not immediately. But there is a weight in the air, like snow building on a roof. The funeral is small, quiet, bitterly cold. The priest wears too thin robes, the cemetery gate sticks, the wind won't quit. But someone reads a psalm in Finnish and English. The body is lowered. Someone hums a hymn that fades into the wind. Afterwards, Maya holds a cup of black coffee in both hands and says softly, "He had a daughter in Minneapolis. We should write." You volunteer. And then, weeks later, a letter arrives. From Pavo, Montana, logging town. Pine trees, cold as anything, but clear and sharp. There's a sauna here, real birch. You can smell it in your dreams. The letter makes the rounds. Everyone reads it, some aloud. Even Maya smiles and mutters, "Pine dreams." Ha! You reread the letter that night. Twice. And for the first time, you start to wonder if there is something beyond this boarding house, this job, this city. You don't say it out loud, not yet, but something inside you has started to turn, like the first crack in the river before the thaw.
The night before your first real dance hall, Ilmi hands you a comb and says, "You're not showing up like that." She yanks your hair into some semblance of order and buttons your shirt all the way up, even though you protest. If you're going to humiliate yourself, at least look clean doing it. The hall is on the edge of town, a converted barn with warped floors and a roof that whistles when the wind hits just right. You walk in and everything is glowing. Lamplight bouncing off tin cups, the glint of sweat on necks, the shimmer of accordion bellows expanding like lungs about to shout. The warmth hits you first, then the noise. Voices in Finnish, English, some strange combination of both. Someone's already half drunk, stomping offbeat, laughing too loudly. And in the corner, a woman tuning a violin with a seriousness that makes you stand straighter. It's not a performance. It's survival. You find a corner. You watch. Your hands go sweaty, and you're not even dancing. Ilmi disappears into the crowd like a fox loosed into the woods. 10 minutes later, she's spinning in circles with a red-faced man whose boots look too small for him. She sees you staring and winks. You hate her for that. You're about to leave when someone taps your shoulder. "She's from Lapua," she says. "Her name's Sani. She smells like winter apples and soap. Her laugh curls like smoke. She holds out her hand and says, 'You look like you need rescuing.' You don't know how to waltz. You try anyway. You step on her toes. Twice. She forgives you both times with a grin and a shrug. 'You're not the worst,' she says. Yet. The floor bounces. The music is relentless. And you, somehow, find yourself laughing, not because you're comfortable, because you're alive.
Historians still debate how much leisure shaped the immigrant identity in America. Was it assimilation, nostalgia, resistance through celebration? All you know is your body is tired from work, your back aches from bending. But here, spinning in wide, ridiculous circles, you remember something close to freedom. Later that night, after the dancing's died down and the hall smells like sour beer and worn-out boots, you sit on the front steps with Sauna. She pulls a flask from her coat, takes a sip, hands it to you. It burns. She talks about Duluth, about her brothers in Chicago, about the train she didn't take. Then she asks, if you miss home. The question lands heavy. Not cruel, just true. You say you don't know anymore, that Finland feels far, but America doesn't feel close. She nods. You're in the middle, like most of us. You look up. Snow's falling lightly now. Dust, not storm. The kind that doesn't stick, but makes everything quieter. You say, this doesn't feel like the middle. She laughs once. Tonight it's enough. Ilmi is waiting for you outside the boarding house when you return, arms crossed, cheeks pink from cold and maybe jealousy. Well, she asks. Well, you say. And that's the whole report. The next morning, your boots feel lighter. Work feels the same, grind, burn, sting, but you move through it with a strange calm. Not because life is easier, but because it's layered now. You've danced, you've forgotten to be afraid, even for an hour. The weekend becomes rhythm. Labor, rest, dancing, aches, rinse, repeat. But there's tension too, a rumor spreading. Wages are dropping again. Management is squeezing harder. The tannery foreman, a bulldog of a man with soot in his teeth, posts new rules, fewer breaks, faster quotas, stricter punishments. One man gets docked for using the outhouse more than twice in a shift. Another is fired for attitude. The Finnish men grumble. So do the Poles, the Irish, the Swedes. Not together yet. One day at lunch, Ilmi reads aloud from a flyer passed around by a man with ink-stained hands. Solidarity meeting this Sunday. Fair wages, fair hours, fair treatment. You recognize the name at the bottom. It's Yuka, the same pastor from church. Turns out he's more than a sermon in a collar. You go. The meeting is loud, hot, desperate. People shout, some plead, some scoff. But in the chaos, a plan forms. Strike. Not tomorrow, but soon. Sani is there, so is Lydia. So is Maya, though she claims she's just there for the cookies. Striking in winter? Bold or stupid, she mutters. Historians still argue whether Finnish immigrants were unusually radical or just pushed too far by cruel conditions. The truth? Probably both. You weren't born to organize labor, but when Ilmi stands up, voice shaking but sure, and says, "We deserve to live, not just survive," you feel something stir. The strike begins quietly. Men stop showing up. Women stop cooking for the bosses. Children stop attending school when their parents can't afford shoes. The factory tries to fill positions with scabs. Fights break out. Bricks fly. Police start patrolling. You hold a sign. It says, "We are not machines." You barely sleep. You attend every meeting, every whispering session in basements and back rooms. Your hands go numb from standing outside in protest. One night, a bottle is thrown and shatters near your head. You don't flinch. Ilmi calls you stupid. Then she knits you a thicker scarf. Maya stops pretending she disapproves. She starts packing sandwiches instead. Weeks pass. The factory doesn't bend, but it groans. Orders slow. Workers from other backgrounds start joining. For once, language doesn't divide. Pain unites. Then, quietly, the owner appears at a meeting. No lawyers, no guards, just a man in a long coat and tired eyes. He doesn't apologize, but he listens. Hours later, someone hands you a paper, a partial agreement. Not perfect, but better. You won. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like surviving. Still, the next shift, when you return, is different. You look at the men beside you. They nod. You nod. The machines still roar. The air still burns, but you are not afraid anymore. Later that night at the boarding house, Ilmi hands you a coffee mug and says, "That's two things you're good at now, protesting and waltzing." You raise the mug to strange skills, and the snow falls again, soft as ash, and your heart is louder than the silence. The first real snowstorm of the year arrives like a scolding grandmother, loud, abrupt, and thoroughly unimpressed by your preparations. By morning, the city is blanketed in white chaos. Streetcars stall, pipes freeze. The tannery closes for a day, not out of mercy, but because no one can get there without sled dogs. You stay in the boarding house, and for once, nobody minds. Maya makes something vaguely resembling stew. Ilmi reads old newspapers aloud with dramatic flair, changing accents for every character. You carve chess pieces out of soap. Sani shows up unexpectedly, soaked through and giggling, saying, "I brought something important." It's a tin of coffee. You stare at it like it's a bar of gold. The Finnish community runs on coffee, dark, strong, boiled beyond reason. It doesn't just wake you, it revives you. It forgives you. And it becomes the core of your newest problem. The Finnish temper is famous, but nothing stirs it quite like bad coffee. It begins with Maya switching brands. Some say it was cheaper, others claim she was secretly experimenting. Whatever the reason, the first pot sends a wave of disgusted grimaces across the breakfast table. Rejo spits out and mutters, "This tastes like shoe water." Ilmi dramatically faints into her chair. Someone starts whispering that Maya has been Americanized. By the end of the week, there are two rival coffee brewers in the boarding house. Maya on one side, Ilmi and a few rogue tenants on the other. Cups are smuggled under coats. Mugs go missing. Someone adds cinnamon to a pot and is nearly exiled. You, tragically, are appointed as the peacekeeper, which is how you end up organizing the first and last Finnish-American coffee showdown in your boarding house's history. Rules are simple. 2 brews, 1 winner. Judges are 3 grumpy men, 1 Finnish grandmother visiting from Duluth, and the violinist from the dance hall, chosen for her neutral tongue. The night is absurd. Ilmi wears a fake mustache. Maya polishes her percolator like it's a rifle. The brews are poured, sips are taken, brows furrow. The violinist claims one has notes of sorrow. The grandmother refuses to answer until someone brings her more sugar. When the results come in, a tie, of course, Maya pretends to be insulted. Ilmi demands a recount, but everyone drinks both cups in the end. And you all stay up past midnight talking about things you usually don't. Regret, hope, the men you left behind, the children you never met, the words you still can't translate. Historians still argue whether co-ops and coffee circles were seeds of Finnish-American political resistance or just a social outlet. But in that warm room, surrounded by laughter, bitterness, and steam, you understand something deeper. It was community. Not perfect, not painless, but alive. The next morning, Maya switches back to the old brand. She never mentions why. Later that week, someone posts a flyer on the boarding house wall. Midwest Co-op Conference, Ishpeming, Michigan. All are welcome. You've never been to Michigan. You're not even sure what a co-op conference is. But Ilmi is already packing. Why Ishpeming, you ask? Because it sounds like a sneeze. Also, Paavo's letter said the Upper Peninsula is beautiful. It takes a week to organize the trip. Sani offers to cover your shift at the tannery. Maya gives you a hand-knit scarf and 3 warnings. The train ride is long, cold, loud. But somewhere past Green Bay, the snow turns into light and the forests open up like something sacred. Ishpeming is small. The streets are green. The people wear more flannel than seems legally acceptable. You meet lumberjacks who've lost fingers and poets who still believe socialism is a sunrise, not a storm. The conference is held in a town hall that smells like pine and politics. You hear speeches about fairness, dignity, education. Some of them bore you. One makes you cry. You pretend it's just the cold. Ilmi joins a youth panel and ends up shouting down a mustached man who claimed women shouldn't vote because they cry too easily. The room erupts in applause. Later that night, she tells me, I wasn't crying, I was furious. I say, same thing sometimes. We both laugh. At the closing night dance, you see faces that make your heart ache. Older versions of friends you left behind. New faces that look like your cousins. A man with your father's eyes. A girl with your sister's smile. You realize migration doesn't erase people. It scatters them like seeds. You sit on the steps with Ilmi again, looking at the clear Michigan sky. She says, would you ever move out here? You pause. Maybe. Maybe when you're not needed in Cleveland. Maybe when your lungs forget the smell of the tannery. Maybe when you know what you're looking for. She says, we could build a sauna, grow beans, get a dog. You nod. You hate beans, she adds. True, but I like dogs. The next morning, you board the train back with a handful of pamphlets, 2 new pen pals, and the distinct feeling that your life has been nudged. The tannery is still there, so is the grind, but you start setting a little money aside, just in case, just for one day. Back at the boarding house, Maya asks, well, you smile. Ishpeming was like a hymn in flannel. She squints. Sounds terrible. Ilmi chimes in. He cried during a speech. You shoot her a look. She shrugs. It was cute. The violinist starts practicing a new piece, a Finnish lullaby. It drifts through the hallways like fog. Someone puts up another flyer. Book club, starting Wednesday. First book, Kalala. You don't read poetry. You attend anyway. Weeks pass. Winter starts to retreat. A few birds return. So does the smell of thawing garbage. Someone steals your boots again. But something's different now. You can feel it. You've tasted what community looks like outside a paycheck. You've seen strangers become allies. You've laughed over bitter coffee and cried over a stranger's story. You've started imagining a future where you choose your life instead of enduring it. And it all began with a cup of coffee that was so bad, it brought people together.
Spring in Cleveland arrives with a soggy shrug. Piles of snow turn into rivers along gutters, and the sidewalks reappear like old friends you forgot you hated. At the boarding house, windows are cracked open for the first time in months, letting in a breeze that smells like thawed dirt and coal dust. You know it's spring because Ilmi has started hanging her laundry outside, and Maja's pickled turnip stash has finally run out. And with spring comes a surge of invitations. Church socials, song circles, political reading nights where nobody actually reads. But the real event, what the entire neighborhood buzzes about for weeks in advance, is the Great Finnish Bake-Off. Nobody calls it that out loud, but everyone knows what it is. 3 churches, 1 old schoolhouse, and 1 very ambitious logging union all claim to have the best Finnish coffee table spread in the state. Each hosts a Saturday social within 2 weeks of each other, and each believes they can out-bake, out-brew, and out-hospitality the others. The weapon of choice? Pullapikko, Finnish braided cardamom bread. You're not a baker. You can barely boil an egg without it judging you, but you get recruited anyway. Ilmi decides this year the boarding house is going to crash the party. She writes, "We are entering the competition" in chalk on the dining room wall. Maja mutters something about pride going before a fall, then starts fermenting turnips again, just in case. You help haul out the flour sacks, peel apples, and tie your apron with the solemnity of a battlefield surgeon. Your job is simple. Test the buns, burn your fingers, report honestly. It's terrifying. Ilmi's first batch is dense enough to be used in street defense. Her second batch is better. The third, you close your eyes while chewing and say, "If you serve this in heaven, no one would ask questions." She blushes, throws a dish towel at your face and says, "It still needs more sugar." The day of the first social arrives with sunshine and buzzing bees. Everyone dresses like it's Easter. You help carry platters down to the church basement, coffee cakes, layered cookies, open-faced sandwiches that somehow include fish and cucumber and dill, all arranged like edible lacework. Inside, the room smells like sugar, yeast, and generational trauma. Elderly women hover near their bakes like hawks in aprons. Men carry cups of boiling hot coffee like it's ritual. Children dart between tables grabbing anything within reach. The judges? Technically everyone. Realistically, the sharp-eyed aunties who note how many refills each tray gets. Ilmi's pulakitko disappears fast. One woman asks for the recipe. Another asks the show cater her daughter's wedding. Ilmi plays it cool, but back home she whispers, "Did you hear that? Cater." Later that night, you sit together at the kitchen table. Everyone is full, tired, happy. Someone's playing an out-of-tune accordion upstairs, and Maja's humming along while she folds the laundry. You say, "I think we won." Ilmi says, "It's not about winning." You raise your eyebrow. "Okay, fine. I think we won too." You lean back and listen to the sounds of spring. Windows open, wind teasing the curtains, laughter from next door. After a winter of strikes and snow, these soft nights feel like a reward. But the baking war has just begun. The next Saturday, it's the Lutheran Church's turn. They bring out a rice pie no one quite can identify and a callberry tart that starts a 5-minute theological argument. Someone declares the coffee too weak. Someone else faints from sugar. A pie crust shatters mid-slice. The drama is delicious. Week 3 is the union's event. Less fancy, more loud. There's a sausage platter the size of a canoe and rye crackers hard enough to damage teeth. You dance with Sani. You almost kiss her. Then someone spills lingonberry sauce on her blouse and she vanishes into the crowd. Ilmi doesn't ask questions, but you catch her smirking into her tea. By the end of the month, the official winner is declared. Nobody. But everyone knows the truth. Ilmi's bread was the most talked about. Maja's pickled turnips made a comeback, and your boarding house is now viewed with suspicious admiration. You return to your daily grind feeling slightly taller. The tannery still stinks, the hours still stretch like stale dough, but the memory of cardamom and candlelight lingers. Historians still debate the role of food in immigrant identity. Did it preserve culture or dilute it for survival? But when Ilmi teaches you how to braid the dough, when Maja lectures on the proper way to ferment root vegetables, when you taste something that reminds you of your grandmother's kitchen, you know the answer isn't either or. It's both. It's survival by memory. Soon, summer creeps in. You start seeing neighbors sitting on stoops in the evening, speaking more English now. Children draw hopscotch grids on the sidewalk. The violinist starts playing outside. Someone opens an ice cream cart. The boarding house feels less like temporary shelter and more like home. And that's when Ilmi gets her idea. "A recipe book," she says. You look up from your mending. "What?" "All of it. The breads, the stews, Maja's terrible turnips, an American survival guide, but with flavor." You consider it. "You'll write the stories," she adds. You raise your eyebrow. "What stories?" "You're always listening. Don't act innocent." And somehow, between shifts at the tannery and community meetings and falling asleep with crumbs on your chest, you begin writing. Not for fame, not for profit, just for the record. You gather recipes scribbled on envelopes, interview elderly neighbors, argue about whether cinnamon belongs in anything. You write in a mixture of English and Finnish, and no one complains. By the end of the season, the book is finished. Ilmi binds it with string and leaves a copy in the church library. You leave another in the coat room of the tannery. Years later, someone finds it and cries. But for now, it's just the summer project. Just one more thread in a tapestry of memory, braided like pulapiko, warm from the oven, soft in the center. And when you taste that first slice, you think,
Not for the first time. Maybe you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
By midsummer, your corner of Cleveland is humming with life. The Iceman whistles again as he rounds the corner, and the kids play kick the can between laundry lines. You've stopped checking the calendar. Time passes now by the smell of overripe berries and the way your shirts stick to your back before breakfast. And then, one morning, you wake to news that changes everything. Sonny's getting married. Not to you. Not even to someone you know. You find out when Ilmi slaps a note onto your toast, an invitation printed in pink ink with lace trim, stuffed into an envelope that smells like perfume and betrayal. Eat, Ilmi says. You'll need your strength. You don't eat. You show up anyway. It's held at the same church where you once danced with Sani under electric lights that buzz like mosquitoes. This time, she wears a white dress that swishes like a river, and her new husband, who works at the steel mill, looks vaguely confused but very proud. You stand near the back. You clap at the right times. You even smile. But inside, it feels like someone just closed a door and turned the key twice. Afterwards, you and Ilmi sit on the church steps. "Well," she says, "there goes your dream of snoring beside her for 40 years. You say nothing. Ilmi bumps her shoulder against yours. "Want to go throw rocks at a lake or something?" You nod. You walk in silence, and at the lake's edge, you pick up pebbles and hurl them into the water like you're teaching them to swim. She throws 3 in a row, then sighs. "Too many men marry the first girl who bakes for them." You say, "She never baked. She fried." Ilmi snorts. You both laugh. The pain doesn't vanish, but it softens like a bruise in warm water. Later that week, the boarding house throws a party. Not for Sani, but because the Cleveland Naps are on a winning streak. You're not much for baseball, but everyone gets pulled in. Even Maija puts on a paper hat. You sit with Rejo and 2 kids from the furniture factory. There's cheap beer, soft pretzels, and loud opinions. When someone asks who your favorite player is, you panic and say, "Napoleon Bonaparte." Nobody corrects you. By September, you're invested. The Naps win, then lose, then win again. You start betting your shift snacks on scores. Ilmi paints her nails the team's color. Dusty brown of industrial sadness, she calls it. At the tannery, the foreman catches you drawing baseball stats on your arm and threatens to demote you to latrine duty. You tell him you'll work twice as hard if he lets you off early next game day. He agrees. The strange part is how American it all feels. You shouting at a wooden radio with 10 other immigrants. You buying peanuts with the last of your week's wages. You actually caring. Historians still debate whether sports were tools of assimilation or rebellion. But in that season, with your heart rising and falling to the rhythm of innings and cheers, you feel like you belong, not by birth, but by choice. That fall, you meet Aino. She's short, quiet, wears spectacles too big for her nose. She reads weather almanacs like they're novels. The first time she speaks to you, she says, "Do you think barometric pressure affects dreams?" You say, "Only if you sleep standing up." She smiles. And somehow you're off. You walk her home 3 nights a week. You sit beside her at the church social. You carve her a hair comb out of walnut, even though your last attempt at woodworking resulted in a chair that leaned like a tired uncle. She loves it. She doesn't laugh at your jokes. She studies them, then nods. You learn she lost a sister on the crossing from Finland. You learned her father was jailed for union work. You learn she's afraid of horses and loves sardines. One day you ask what she thinks of marriage. She blinks twice. "I suppose it's just teamwork with taxes?" You grin. "So, interested?" She blushes and says, "Maybe."
if you stop saying bazoom every time something explodes on the radio. You promise. In November, the Naps lose spectacularly. The entire neighborhood sulks for a week. Ilmi throws her paper hat into the furnace. Maija pretends not to care, but you catch her muttering, "They should have benched that fool weeks ago." You try not to think about next season. You focus instead on something smaller, quieter. You and Aino start renting a single room above a seamstress's shop. The walls are thin, the sink leaks, the mattress squeaks if you breathe too loud. But it's yours. She brings a bookshelf, you bring a frying pan. It's enough. The first morning in the new place, you burn the eggs. She kisses you anyway. And just like that, your life tilts. You still work at the tannery, you still visit the boarding house for coffee and gossip, but now you have a place to retreat, a home with curtains she made from a tablecloth, and a door that sticks just enough to say, "Not everyone gets in." One night, Aino brings out a small wooden box. Inside are 5 photographs: her mother, her school, a dog she loved, a field, and a single picture of her as a child holding a spoon bigger than her head. You hold it gently. She says, "These are all the places I've been." You nod. "Let's make new ones," you say. You don't mean photographs. Not exactly. You mean stories. You mean the night the thunder shook your windows and she held your hand under the blanket. The time she sneezed in church and 3 pews turned to stare. The day you caught a fish so small she named it troutlet and demanded a funeral. You start collecting memories like some people collect stamps. And slowly, your heart heals. You realize Sani wasn't the last chance. She was just the first chapter. And Aino? She's the kind of woman who brings tea to your bath, reads you your dreams, and tells you when you've got spinach in your teeth without making you feel small. That winter, you marry quietly. No invitations, no paper hats, just you, her, and Ilmi, crying so hard the pastor offers him his sleeve. And afterwards, you go home. Not to Finland, not to any grand palace, just upstairs, just through that stubborn little door, where your frying pan waits, where your socks dry above the stove, where someone says, "Welcome home," and means it.
You're 3 years into your marriage with Aino when the past taps you lightly on the shoulder, just enough to make you turn. The letter arrives on a damp Tuesday, nestled between a hardware store flyer and a church bulletin. No return address, no sender's name, just a faint floral scent, barely clinging to the paper like a forgotten ghost. You open it with the same casual dread one reserves for overdue bills or telegrams from distant cousins. Inside, 3 sentences, handwritten in a familiar, stubborn script. I'm in Oregon now, running a farm, alive if nothing else. Sani. You read it twice, then once more aloud, your voice barely audible over the squeak of the stovetop kettle. Aino, who's kneading dough with the quiet fury only Finnish women can conjure, doesn't look up. She wrote. You nod. She dusts flour from her hands. What does she want? Nothing. Just wanted to say she's alive. Well, Aino mutters. So are cockroaches. Doesn't mean I want them in the pantry. You smirk. But later, when the house is quiet and the dishes are drying in their usual crooked pattern, you take out the letter again, folded once, precisely. No bitterness, no longing, just a flare of honesty in 3 flat lines. And it hits you, not as regret, but as a strange warmth, like discovering an old scarf in the back of your closet and realizing it still fits.
Sani, the girl who once taught you how to roll cigarettes with one hand, who sang in broken French after 3 sips of elderberry wine, who made you believe, briefly, that America could be romantic, even while your boots were cracking from cold and your fingers reeked of tanning chemicals. You lie back on the bed, staring at the ceiling with its familiar water stain shaped like a sleeping cat. Do you ever think, you ask Aino, what life might have been like if we'd met later, after I'd grown up a bit? She shrugs. Then I probably would have said no. You both laugh. Still, the question lingers, not like a wound, but like a gentle itch behind the ribs. Spring rolls in with its usual indecision. The roads turn to soup, and the boarding house roof leaks again. Maya blames the Catholics, which somehow becomes a heated dinner debate about architecture and sin. And then, one afternoon, Ilmi bursts into your home like a windstorm in boots. Guess who I just saw? She grins. You don't need to guess. She's in town? You ask, already reaching for your cleanest shirt. Just passing through. Says she's here for goat feed and a funeral. Of course. You find her the next day, leaning against a telephone pole, one boot untied, a paper cone of roasted peanuts in her hand. Sani. Her hair is streaked with silver, and her eyes are the same unblinking gray-blue as before, like winter lakes before the first thaw. She's wearing a green scarf, the same shade she always wore when she wanted to feel brave. Didn't expect you, she says, no smile, but no sting either. Didn't expect goats, you reply. She chuckles. Life's full of surprises, like onion ice cream or jazz. You both sit on the steps of the empty train depot, the same bench where you once waited for your cousin Arrow and nearly froze your toes off. This time, the sun is out. The shadows are short. Do you ever think, she asks, going back? You don't need to ask where she means. Sometimes, you say, when I smell rye bread or hear someone cough in Finnish. She nods. I thought about it once, after I lost the farm the first time. You glance sideways. You lost it? Goats got sick. Land flooded. Then some fellow with a clipboard said my fence crossed an invisible line and fined me half a year's wages. Oof. That's America, she says, biting a peanut. Invisible lines and expensive mistakes. A train whistles in the distance, a sound too far off to matter. You happy? You ask, finally. She chews, swallows. Content, most days. She offers you a peanut. You take one, crunch thoughtfully. Me too. She leans back, eyes closed to the sun. You always look like a man about to apologize, she murmurs. Was I? Sometimes. But I think I like that. You felt honest, even when you weren't. You both sit in silence for a while, letting the past hover without settling, like dust in a sunbeam. Not painful, not sweet, just present. When she stands, she dusts off her skirt with practiced ease. Well, she says, I'm off. Feed to buy, funeral to not cry at. You stand too. I hope your goats are less rebellious now. She grins. They only bite strangers and politicians. Before she turns, she pats your shoulder. Not a caress, not a goodbye. Just a gentle punctuation mark at the end of an old sentence. That night, you tell Aino everything. She listens while brushing her hair. So, she says at last, do you love her still?
You think about it. Maybe a little, but it's a faded kind, like old ink on laundry. She nods. Then she says, I love you enough for both of us. And that's that. In the weeks that follow, life resumes its usual pace. Slow, steady, laced with rye and rain. You hang laundry. You fix a hinge that never really wanted fixing. You help Rajo install a new stove, which promptly explodes, and spend the evening picking bits of potato out of your eyebrows. And through it all, something soft settles in your chest. Not longing, not regret, just a quiet gratitude that you got to love two different people in two different ways. Historians still argue whether immigrant stories should be told as triumphs or tragedies, but you suspect they're missing the third path, the one paved with small tendernesses, missed trains, and letters sent too late. You write a final note to Sani. No questions, no openings, just thanks for the dance. The music is different now, but I still remember the steps. You don't expect a reply. And that's okay. Because at home, I know hums a lullaby while peeling potatoes. The radio murmurs about rain. And you, sitting at the window, feel no ache, no sharp edge. Only the smooth roundness of a life lived honestly, with room for a few wrong turns. Sani may be gone again, off to the foggy hills and goat fences of Oregon. But she's no longer a question. She's a story, one of many. And tonight, you sleep a little deeper, because sometimes love doesn't leave. It just changes shape.
You pack your bags on a Tuesday in October. The light through the window is weak and amber, as if the sun can't quite commit to shining anymore. There's a coldness to it, not the sharp frost of December, but the hesitant chill that makes your bones whisper, it's time to go. You fold your shirt slowly, rolling each sleeve like a prayer. I know watches from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, lips a thin line. Just a visit, she asks. That's the plan, you say. She doesn't answer, just tilts her head the way she does when she knows something you don't. The year is 1931. The Depression has eaten everything. Not with teeth, but with a slow, tireless hunger. Jobs vanish like steam. Coins shrink in your hands. Stores close. Men who once swaggered now loiter near rail cars, hoping to be useful, to be needed, to be anything again. You've been between jobs for 6 months. You try not to say the word unemployed. It tastes too final. Your fingers itch for Finland, for something familiar, for pine needles underfoot, for voices that don't ask you to repeat your name twice. You've written to your brother in Oulu. He says things are worse there, if that's even possible. But at least you'd be among your own. You stare at the suitcase. It's small, patched, and a little drunk from the years. Like you. You think about the ships, about New York, about the smell of salt and coal, about Sani, I know, the failed bakery attempt, the goats, the time you fought your landlord over one missing floorboard, and the accordion solo that made you cry in 22. It's not just homesickness. It's a spiritual fracture. Historians still argue whether immigrant nostalgia is memory or myth, whether people miss the country they left or simply the person they were before they left it. You're not sure, but you know you miss a version of yourself who believed things could get better just by crossing an ocean. At the train station, I know hold your hand. Not tightly, but with steadiness. You can go, she says.
I won't stop you. You look at her. Her hair is pulled back, the way she always wears it when she's sad but refuses to say it. I need to see, you tell her. I just need to see. She says, I know, then hands you a parcel of bread and dried fish. The train hisses. The conductor shouts. You step on. Your seat is by the window, where you watch the trees blur into watercolor. You wonder if the land itself remembers who you are, if the tracks you now follow have names or just numbers. 2 days later, you reach New York. It's still loud, still smells like warm metal, and dreams gone sour. You walk the streets like a ghost, retracing old haunts. The boarding house is gone, turned into a storefront with mannequins and flapper dresses. The church is still there. So is the bakery, somehow. You buy a roll. It's drier than you remember, but memory is often juiced with kindness. You see a man who looks like Marty. You almost call out, but the face is wrong. Too tired. Too American. You visit Ellis Island again, not to enter, but to stand by the water and remember who you were when you first arrived. A bundle of nerves and hope, smelling of sea salt and boiled wool, scared out of your skull and pretending otherwise. You stay in the city for a week, apply for work, get nothing but polite shrugs and one half-hearted offer to sweep floors in a theater that shows silent films to nearly silent audiences. It isn't the America you came for. It's something else, something older, something hollowed out. You consider boarding a ship, just walking onto the docks and offering to scrub decks until Finland appears on the horizon. But one night, sitting on a park bench with stale peanuts and a pigeon's gaze, a child runs past you, laughing in Finnish. Tulkini jos uskallat. Catch me if you dare. You turn. The child disappears into a cluster of trees. But in that moment, something clicks. This land isn't just factories and rent and disappointments. It holds echoes of your people. Their feet, their voices, their breadcrumbs and broken rules. They're here. You're here. You write I know. Just one line. I'm coming home. And you mean her, not Finland. When you return to your town, the trees are bare. The house smells like soap and onions. Aino has left your boots by the fire. You didn't go, she says. I did, but I didn't stay. She doesn't smile, doesn't cry, just sets down a bowl of stew and tells you, eat before it congeals. You do. And that night, lying in bed, the wind tapping like a polite ghost against the window pane, you think, maybe going back isn't about geography. Maybe it's about choosing, again and again, to stay where the love is. You never talk much about the trip, but you do tell stories about the girl who sold roasted chestnuts in Times Square, about the one-armed preacher quoting Shakespeare, about the elderly doorman who told you, son, you're either running towards something or away. Pick one. You picked. And somehow, after all that running, you stopped. In a house with leaky gutters, a tin coffee pot, and a woman who still tells you when your jokes are bad. America didn't promise you anything, but it gave you this. A strange, stubborn life, one you built with both hands, even when you almost left.
You open the back door, and the cold greets you like an old rival, sharp, uninvited, but somehow familiar. The snow crunches under your boots as you step out into the yard. A thin line of smoke curls from the chimney of your sauna, drifting lazily into the blue-black sky. The stars are out, dusted across the heavens like spilled sugar, and your breath comes in soft clouds as you walk toward the warmth. The door creaks open, and you step inside. Steam hits you instantly, thick, fragrant, filled with birch and sweat and memory. You strip down in silence, placing your clothes on a bench worn smooth by years of routine. You toss a scoop of water on the rocks and sit down on the middle bench, wood warm against your skin. The hiss rises like a serpent, and then the silence returns. You close your eyes. This is where everything quiets. This is where you have always come to remember. The others arrive slowly. Rayo, Lowry, Auntie, Maija. Each one enters with their own bundle of silence, their own aching joints, their own ghosts. You greet each other with nods, not words. Language isn't needed here. Heat and presence speak for you. Water splashes again. Another hiss. The rocks crackle. The temperature climbs. You listen to your body sigh. First time I came to America, I thought Chicago was a village, Lowry says suddenly. Rayo snorts. Still does. You laugh softly. The kind of laugh you only share with people who know what it means to be rootless for too long. You lean back, your spine against the plank, and let your memories rise like the steam around you. You remember the first sauna you built in Minnesota. It was barely a shack, patched with old crates and salvaged nails. But you needed it. You needed a place where you could peel off your exhaustion and scrub away the invisible weight of trying to be American all day. It smelled like your grandfather's back porch and your mother's pine soap. That sauna didn't last through the second winter. But you rebuilt, and rebuilt again. Now, this one stands firm. Cedar planked, stone lined, a little crooked maybe, but so are you. Maija pours water over the rocks. The hiss sounds like applause. We used to bathe once a week. Now, I need this every day or I forget who I am. There are nods. Historians still argue whether saunas kept Finnish immigrants sane or simply gave them something to cling to when everything else felt foreign. Some say it was a survival mechanism. Others call it a sacrament. You've always leaned toward the latter. Outside, the snow thickens. The wind howls through the pines. But in here, your skin glows red, your heart slows, and the world holds still. Auntie clears his throat. You ever think we're the last ones? The real Finns here? A silence follows, not heavy, but contemplative. I used to, you say, but my granddaughter swears in 2 languages and knows how to chop wood. Good enough? Laurie asks. You nod. It better be. The door opens briefly to let in a rush of freezing air, and Arvo, soaked in snow and smiling like a lunatic, got lost. Twice. Everyone laughs. The room feels lighter now, steam curling in lazy ribbons above your heads. You all sit quietly for a while, breathing, sweating, remembering. Then slowly, one by one, you step outside, barefoot in the snow. It burns, then numbs. You stand under the stars, skin steaming, chest bare, hair damp. You feel alive and ancient, like a tree that survived 20 winters and still hasn't cracked. Somebody whoops and rolls in the snowbank, probably Rayo, definitely Rayo. You don't join him, not tonight. You lift your face to the sky and whisper a line your father used to say after a long sauna. Koko maailma voisi olla hiljaiut. The whole world could be silent now. And it is. Later, inside, Aino has laid out coffee and pula. The lights are low, the radio is humming an old waltz, and the house smells like cardamom and smoke. You gather in your kitchen, still warm from the sauna, wrapped in old towels and wool socks. You pour coffee into enamel mugs, the kind that chip easily and still last forever. You sit together in the dim light, not talking much, just sipping, nodding, enjoying the peace that only comes after heat and snow and honesty.
Somehow, this is when the real stories come out. Reijo confesses he tried to write a novel once. Maija admits she almost left for California. Lowry says he never believed in God until his first son took a breath. You tell them you once considered going back to Finland. They all pause. But you didn't, Auntie says. No, you reply, because here I built something. And it's true. You look around your small kitchen, the peeling linoleum, the patched ceiling, the pot of leftover stew on the stove. It's not much, but it's yours. You remember the first time you heard English spoken fluently, the way the words sounded like they were trying to outrun each other. You remember the first letter you sent home, how you lied and said everything was fine. You missed Christmas, and then missed Finland, and then missed both. But now you miss less, because you've added, not subtracted. You married, you raised children, you buried friends, you planted apple trees, you built a sauna. You lost your accent in some places, kept it in others. You became something in between, not quite American, not quite Finnish, but entirely real. Your granddaughter comes in, her cheeks red from the cold, her mittens dripping. Grandpa, can I go ice skating tomorrow? Only if you take your brother, you reply. She rolls her eyes. Fine. She kisses your cheek and runs upstairs. You smile. Because that's the answer to Auntie's question. No, you're not the last real Finn. They're still here. They just wear sneakers now and eat peanut butter. And maybe they don't speak perfect Finnish, but they know where the sauna key is, and they call you Uki. You finish your coffee, wipe the counter, and say goodnight to everyone. Then you step out one last time into the snow. The sky is still lit with stars. The house behind you glows like a lantern in the dark, and you feel more yourself than you ever have. You're not lost anymore. You're home.
Morning finds you in the quiet. The house breathes softly around you. Floorboards creak with old familiarity, and the stove still radiates the last warmth from last night's fire. You sit at the kitchen table, a thick wool sweater pulled over your shoulders, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. The coffee inside has gone cold, but you don't mind. It's not about the heat anymore. It's the taste, the ritual, the memory. The snow outside lays thick, like a soft blanket pulled over the world. It muffles the sound of passing cars. It hushes the trees. It silences even the wind. You look through the window and see the backyard sauna, standing like a wooden guardian of your years. Smoke no longer rises from its chimney this morning. The door is shut. The benches inside cooled. But the memory of last night still lingers on your skin, on your breath, in your bones. They'll come again next weekend, those old friends. They always do. But for now, you're alone. And it's not a sad thing. It's a gentle thing, a closing circle. You glance at the small photo on the wall, a black and white print, the corners curling. You, 25, with your arm around Aino, her head resting on your shoulder, both of you dressed for a church picnic, awkward and beautiful in a field of long grass. You remember that day. You had just gotten word from home. A cousin had died in the war. You didn't talk about it. You just held her hand. You still do sometimes, even now, in your sleep, in your thoughts. Grief softens over time, like sea glass, like driftwood. You finish your coffee and move to the front room. There's a drawer here, beneath the windowsill, stuffed with letters, receipts, scraps of stories written on the backs of envelopes. You pull it open, digging past a rusted harmonica, a broken clothespin, an old church bulletin from 1947. You find what you're looking for,
A folded note, brittle at the edges, your mother's handwriting. You've read it hundreds of times, but still your eyes stop at the first line. Be brave, but not too proud to ask for help. She wrote that before you left Finland. You didn't understand it at 20. You understand it now. They say Finnish graves in America are the easiest to find. Small, plain, often with just a first name and dates. No angels, no statues, just earth and silence. You've walked among them. In Michigan, in Minnesota, in Wisconsin. You've seen your own name etched in stone beside someone else's life. You've read the epitaphs. Beloved husband, mother of 6, came from Lapland, worked in the mines, died in a storm, never forgot Finland. And yet, this was home too. You chose it. You built your life plank by plank, paycheck by paycheck, winter by winter. You struggled. You succeeded. You failed. You forgave yourself. You learned to say thank you in 2 languages and curse in 3. Your children grew up here. Some moved away. Some stayed. One went to California and came back twice. Another married a Lutheran who plays accordion. You have 7 grandchildren now. One of them wants to be a doctor. One of them makes puppets. Another can bake better than I know, and I knows it. They visit you now and then, these grandchildren, asking about the old days. You tell them what you can. You leave out the worst. You give them stories with softened edges. Last month, the youngest brought you a program project, a family tree. You pointed at names, faces. You told her about your father, the one who chopped wood for a railway in Oulu. You told her about the storm that almost kept your ship from leaving port. You told her about the word sisu and how it doesn't translate well, but she should learn it anyway. She nodded. She listened. She wrote it down. That's how it begins again. Historians still argue whether the Finnish-American identity was preserved or diluted, whether the children remembered or only the recipes survived, whether 1,000 saunas in 1,000 backyards were enough to anchor a people. You think, yes. Yes, they were. Because even now, as your legs ache and your hands tremble, you feel it. Not just memory, not just nostalgia, but belonging. You rise and walk slowly down the hallway, passing the photo wall, the children, the weddings, the fishing trips, the time you all wore matching sweaters in a fit of misguided enthusiasm. You open the door to the porch. Outside, the world is still asleep. A dusting of snow sparkles under the morning light. A rabbit has left tracks across the path. The woodpile leans slightly, the way it always does. You look toward the far end of the yard, the place you've already chosen. The stone is there, simple and smooth. Your name already carved. The rest will come later. You don't fear it. You've prepared. The cross above it was carved from a birch tree you felled yourself. 2 names on it already, Ino's and your own. You sit on the porch, blanket over your lap, and smile, because you remember it all. The salt of the Atlantic, the smell of mill grease, the sting of betrayal, and the balm of forgiveness. The joy of the first paycheck, the tears of the first loss, the taste of victory, however small, the voice of your mother on the page, the sound of your children laughing through an open window, the weight of nothing in your hands, and everything in your heart. You lean back. The world exhales. The snow begins to fall again. And somewhere, in some house, someone lights a stove.
Now let it all settle. Let the sounds of this old life, train whistles, creaking sauna doors, quiet toasts in dark kitchens, drift like mist through your thoughts. You don't need to hold on to every name or every face, just the feeling, the warmth in your chest, the steam on your skin. The long road has led somewhere gentle. Your story, like the best ones, loops without hurry. It sings softly. It does not shout. So, if your mind drifts, let it. If your body relaxes, good. If your breath slows and your thoughts unravel like an old wool scarf, let them. This was never about history in a textbook. It was about the weight of a shovel, the smell of rye bread, the hush between snowfalls. You've seen struggle, joy. You've walked miles in someone else's boots. And now, finally, you can take them off. The fire has burned low. The coffee cup is empty. And your work is done. Sleep now, in peace. You've earned it.